Welcome back. Social justice movements want a halt to evictions. Remember, we brought you the story also last week. During this COVID-19 pandemic, government has said only that temporary shelters will be made available for the homeless. Let's get reaction now from one of the organizations calling for evictions to be halted. Joining me via Skype again is Mpho Rabewane, attorney from the Law Centre Ndifuna Ukwazi. Mpho, good evening to you. Great to see you again. So last week you had written to government making this request on a suspension of evictions. Have you been communicated with directly on that?
Hi, Tembegile. Unfortunately, we've had no official response from government pertaining to our letter to them asking them for a moratorium on evictions.
So what happens now that you've not heard from them specifically? Are you going to now hope that the regulations announced for the homeless will then benefit those who are possibly evicted during this period?
Look, Tembegile, we recognize that there are a myriad of priorities at this time, and the decision makers, along with the president, are faced with a lot of priorities that they are currently grappling with. That said, the measures implemented that were announced last night, particularly pertaining to the relocation of the homeless and those provisions made for them, while we recognize and commend that they will go some way in protecting those who currently live in conditions where there is not sufficient hygiene or protection from the spread of COVID-19. We are concerned and we are watching the implementation of some of these measures. What we mean by that is, in this time leading up to the lockdown and even during the lockdown, we are concerned that people who are living in informality and who are not necessarily homeless will have these measures used against them in terms of removing and displacing them from their homes.
And I suppose what that speaks to then, that point, Mpho, is the lack of clear planning around the long-term future of people in this country who may not have a formal address, who may be living on the street. What happens to them post the reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Definitely, Tembegile. We have not seen any clear outlines or plans that will be implemented post the 3 weeks. We have not seen any plans or directions in terms of what will happen to those homeless who have now been placed in temporary relocation areas when this pandemic has ostensibly passed, or where those who cannot self-isolate at home are now showing signs of being well. So we are also posing that very same question of what will then happen to those who have either been displaced through these measures or to the homeless that have now been sheltered temporarily, but also now face life on the streets again thereafter.
And in terms of people then, have you heard from people directly who are in this predicament where come the end of the month they are likely to be evicted? Are they coming forward? And if they are, what are they telling you?
Unfortunately, Tembegile, we have not had any direct interactions with people facing evictions during this time, but we do note and we have seen from public reports and passers-by and the like that officials are continuing to execute evictions during this time, even in this time of state of disaster. We are also very cognizant that in the days leading up to the 21-day lockdown, it is really business as usual. Most courts are in session and evictions may continue being issued and executed. So we're particularly concerned about those who are now facing homelessness or facing displacement to temporary relocation areas that mimic the conditions of informality that we had in our letter said would contribute to the spread of COVID-19. There are no directives from the judiciary or from government in terms on a specific moratorium on evictions, even in light of a call from the UN Special Rapporteur Leilani Farah asking that there be a global ban on all evictions everywhere.
Mporabewane with Ndifuna Ukwazi, thank you so much for speaking to us and for speaking to us again about the plight of people who face homelessness over the coming days, especially as we head into that national lockdown.